I need you to stop and pay close attention to what I'm about to say, because what's happening right now is no coincidence. The algorithm didn't just bring you here. Your finger didn't accidentally click this video. Something much, much deeper is at work. Something that Carl Jung mapped out over a century ago and that Andrew Huberman has validated in his Stanford lab with cutting-edge neuroimaging technology. You're watching this video because a part of you, a part you might not even know exists, recognized that you needed this message, and neuroscience has now proven that this kind of recognition happens before you're even consciously aware of it. But here's the problem. Academia hides this connection. Huberman knows it, but can't say it outright. Jung was ridiculed for decades for even trying to explain it. And you, right now, are about to understand something that less than 1% of people who watch self-help videos will ever grasp. So let me ask you something. What's going on in your life right now? What question have you been internally asking yourself over the past few weeks? What strange feeling that something needs to change has been haunting you? Hold that question, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why your brain brought you here, how Jung predicted this moment a century ago, and what Huberman discovered about the neural mechanism that makes you find exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. This isn't mysticism. This is cutting-edge neuroscience, combined with depth psychology. And when you understand how it works, you'll never look at a coincidence the same way again. Let's start with what science has recently discovered that changes everything. In May of 2024, Andrew Huberman did something that few truly grasped the importance of. He brought on a Jungian psychoanalyst named James Hollis to his podcast, not a neuroscientist, not a biochemist, an analyst trained at the Carl Gustav Jung Institute of Zurich. And the nearly 3-hour conversation revealed something Huberman clearly knew, but had never stated so directly. Hollis explained that the first half of life is a huge and inevitable mistake because we live only reactively. We react to what our family expects, to what society demands, to what fear dictates. And this reactivity creates patterns that control us without us even realizing it. But here's the crucial detail that connects to you watching right now. Hollis said that in pivotal moments in life, there's a question that can determine everything. The question is, does this enlarge me psycho-spiritually, or does it diminish me? And you know what happens neurologically when you really ask yourself that question? Huberman had already explained it in previous episodes. Your brain activates a specific network called the default mode network. This network is responsible for self-reflection, for connecting memories, for creating meaning. And research published in 2025 demonstrated that this network is literally the core of consciousness, the nexus of convergence and divergence in the human brain. When you encounter something significant, like this video right now, your default mode network fires up. It recognizes patterns. It connects what you're experiencing now with deep memories. It creates that feeling of this was meant to happen, and Jung called this synchronicity. But hold on, because what I'm about to reveal is even deeper than you can imagine. Jung didn't just invent synchronicity out of thin air. He spent years studying cases where patients reported coincidences that seemed to have meaning. Cases where someone was thinking about someone and that person called. Where they dreamed about something and it happened. Where they found exactly the information they needed at the exact right moment. Orthodox science called it confirmation bias. Said it was just the human brain, looking for patterns where they don't exist. And for decades, that was the accepted explanation. But then, neuroscience advanced, and what they discovered changed everything. Dr. Diego Bojorquez, a professor at Duke University, appeared on the Huberman lab to discuss something called gut feeling. He explained that there's a phenomenon where you seem to know something without really knowing how you know it, a sensation that comes from the body, from the gut, and that somehow directs your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And here's the part that no one connects. Bojorquez explained that this communication between gut and brain happens through the vagal system. The neurons in your gut literally send signals to the brain that influence decision-making, and Huberman confirmed that his lab studies how peripheral states like breathing, heart rate, and levels of autonomic activation interact with the brain to influence decisions under pressure. Do you understand what this means? When you felt something pulling you to click on this video, it wasn't your imagination. It was real neural communication between your body and your brain, a communication that happened before your conscious mind processed the decision. Jung would call this the unconscious knowing before the conscious. Huberman would call it subliminal processing via the gut-brain axis. It's the same phenomenon, described in different languages, separated by 100 years of history. And academia has kept these two explanations separate on purpose. Let me tell you why. If you accept that Jung and Huberman are describing the same thing, you need to accept something uncomfortable. You need to accept that there's a form of knowledge that doesn't come from conscious reason, that your body knows things, that your mind hasn't processed yet, that the universe, or at least the nature of your nervous system, operates in ways that reductionist, materialist science can't fully explain. And that threatens academic careers, threatens publications in prestigious journals, threatens research funding. James Hollis shared on the Huberman podcast that a depression led him to completely change careers. He said something from below reached up and pulled him down, and at the bottom of that depression, he found a task, a purpose, something that led him to leave a stable academic position and go to Switzerland to retrain as a psychoanalyst. That's synchronicity in action, life conspiring to put you exactly where you need to be, and your brain has a neurological mechanism to recognize these moments. Huberman explained that the salience network determines what deserves your attention, and when something significant appears, this network fires along with the default mode network, creating that experience of, this is important, this means something. Now think about what happened for you to get here. You were browsing the internet, thousands of videos available, millions of options for how to spend your time, and something made you stop on this one. Something made your finger click, something made you keep watching until now. That was your salience network recognizing a pattern, your default mode network connecting with something you're experiencing, your vagal system sending signals that this deserves attention. In other words, your unconscious recognized before your conscious mind that this video contained something you need. And now, I need to tell you what happens when you ignore these signals. Carl Jung extensively documented what happens to patients who repeatedly ignore the wisdom of the unconscious. He called it neurosis, a conflict between what the conscious person wants and what the deep self needs. And Andrew Huberman has validated this neurologically. When there's a conflict between higher cortical processing and deeper limbic signals, the result is chronic stress, anxiety, that persistent feeling that something is wrong, even when externally everything seems fine. Do you know that feeling, that unease that just won't go away? That feeling that you should be doing something different, but you don't know what? That gut feeling that there's more, that you're not living the life you're meant to live. That's your unconscious trying to communicate, and each time you ignore it, the signal gets stronger, until eventually it manifests as a symptom, like depression, like a crisis, like that moment where life forces you to stop and pay attention. James Hollis said on the podcast that at the bottom of every depression, there's a task, and I add, at the bottom of every unease, there's a message. The question is, are you listening? This video came to you for a reason, and the reason isn't mystical. It's neurological. It's psychological. It's the combination of what Carl Jung mapped and Andrew Huberman validated operating through your nervous system. But knowing this isn't enough. You need a protocol. You need something practical to transform this understanding into action. And that's exactly what I'm going to give you now. In December of 2024, there was a conference called Beyond Jung. The theme was Living Synchronicity, a journey into meaningful coincidence. Researchers from various universities gathered to examine how synchronicity functions as a principle of connection through meaning. What they concluded aligns perfectly with what Huberman teaches about neuroplasticity. The ability to recognize synchronicities can be developed. Just as you can train your brain for any skill, you can train it to perceive the signals that the universe, or your unconscious, is constantly sending. And the hybrid protocol I'm going to teach you combines Jungian practices with Huberman's protocols in a way that's never been presented before. First, you need to activate your default mode network intentionally. Huberman recommends periods of reflection without external stimulus. No cell phone, no music, no distraction, just you with your thoughts. This allows the network that creates meaning to operate without interference. Jung called this amplification, allowing thoughts and images to emerge naturally from the unconscious, without the control of the rational mind. The practice is simple. Every day, set aside 10 minutes where you do nothing. Don't meditate with an app. Don't follow instructions. Just sit and let your mind wander. What arises for a reason. Write it down afterward. Second, you need to develop what Jung called active imagination, and that neuroscience now connects with the default mode network. It's the practice of dialoguing internally with parts of yourself that seem to have their own will. Sounds strange? Neuroscience has validated it. Your brain contains multiple networks that can operate semi-independently. When you dialogue internally, you're literally allowing communication between different neural systems. The practice works like this. When you have a strong emotion, a gut feeling, a striking dream, treat it as if it were a message from another part of you. Ask internally, "What are you trying to tell me?" And wait. The answer comes. It can be as a thought, as an image, as a bodily sensation. Third, and this is where Huberman adds something crucial, you need to calibrate your nervous system so that the signals arrive with clarity. If your body is constantly in a state of stress, the subtle signals from the unconscious get lost in the noise. Huberman recommends specific protocols. Exposure to sunlight in the first 60 minutes of the day to calibrate your circadian rhythm, controlled breathing, especially the physiological sigh, 2 short inhales followed by a long exhale to activate your parasympathetic system. Regular exercise to process accumulated cortisol. These practices seem to have no connection with synchronicity, but they do. When your nervous system is regulated, you perceive the signals that previously went unnoticed. Intuition becomes clearer. Coincidences become obvious. What seemed like chance reveals its pattern. Fourth, you need to document. Jung kept extensive diaries. He recorded dreams, thoughts, coincidences, and over time, patterns emerged that weren't visible in day-to-day life. Create a simple record, Every day, write down one coincidence you noticed. It may seem insignificant. Write it down anyway. After 30 days, review it. You'll start to see connections that your conscious mind missed. And fifth, and perhaps most important, you need to act on the signals. Jung emphasized that insight without action is sterile. James Hollis said in the podcast with Huberman that when you reach a turning point in life, you need to ask, does this path enlarge me or diminish me? And when the answer comes, you need to act, even with fear, especially with fear, because fear often indicates exactly where growth is waiting. This hybrid protocol, silent reflection, plus active imagination, plus nervous system regulation, plus documentation, plus action, is what unites Carl Jung and Andrew Huberman in a practical way. It's what transforms intellectual understanding into real transformation. But I need to warn you about something. When you start to perceive synchronicities, when you start to listen to your unconscious, your life changes, and not always in comfortable ways. Hollis shared that his depression made him leave a stable and secure career to follow an uncertain calling. Jung went through a crisis of years that almost destroyed him before emerging with his greatest discoveries. The path of self-knowledge isn't easy, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is to live someone else's life, to follow scripts that aren't yours, to reach the end and realize you never really lived. And if you've made it this far in this video, something in you already knows this. Something in you is already asking for more, is already ready to listen to what the unconscious has to say. The question isn't if the signals are there. They've always been there. The question is, are you going to pay attention now? Do you remember the question I asked at the beginning? What's happening in your life right now? What questions have you been asking yourself internally? I want you to hold on to that question. While I process what I'm about to say, you've just received information that most people will never have access to. The connection between Carl Jung and Andrew Huberman, the neural mechanism of synchronicity, the practical protocol to develop this capacity. This didn't happen by accident. Your brain brought you here because a part of you is ready for the next level, and that part needs support to continue operating. I'm going to be direct. Researching and connecting Jung with Huberman in a rigorous way takes time. Each of these videos represents dozens of hours reading papers, watching entire episodes of the Huberman Lab, studying original texts by Jung. And academia doesn't fund this kind of work. In fact, it actively discourages it because it threatens established paradigms, the establishment as a whole. When you use superthanks, that golden heart down below, you're not just providing financial support. You're saying, continue revealing these connections, continue doing the work that others are afraid to do, continue uniting depth psychology with cutting-edge neuroscience. And it's more than that. You're aligning yourself with a group of people who understand that true knowledge comes from synthesis, that Jung and Huberman aren't opposites but complementary, that ancient wisdom and modern science point to the same truths. Think about it. You're not a passive spectator consuming content. You're an active seeker of understanding, and every search needs resources to continue. Now, let me tell you what happens when you really integrate this knowledge. Recent research on the default mode network has shown something fascinating. When people practice loving kindness meditation, this network reconfigures itself in a way that increases self-esteem and confidence. But more than that, it increases the capacity to recognize meaningful connections. In other words, the more you work with your internal world, the more synchronicities you perceive. Not because they increase, but because your ability to recognize them expands. Jung knew this intuitively. He wrote that, Whoever looks outside dreams. Whoever looks inside awakens. And the awakening he describes is exactly this expansion of consciousness, where meaning becomes visible everywhere. Huberman has translated this into neural language. When you train your attention internally, you literally rewire brain circuits, new synapses form, old patterns dissolve, and your perception of reality changes because the apparatus that perceives has changed. And here's the deepest implication that almost no one talks about. If your consciousness can change your perception of reality, and if synchronicities are events that seem to respond to internal states, then on some level, your consciousness is interacting with reality in ways that materialist science can't explain. Jung suspected this. He developed the concept of synchronicity together with Wolfgang Pauli, one of the greatest quantum physicists in history. Pauli was fascinated with the connections between mind and matter, and together they published a work that suggested that there's a principle of connection that isn't causal in the traditional sense. The academia establishment buried this work. It was considered too speculative, too mystical, non-scientific, but neuroscience is rediscovering it. Research with psychedelics, for example, shows that when the default mode network is temporarily suppressed, people report experiences of deep connection, of expanded meaning, of multiplied synchronicities. And when they come back, they frequently report permanent changes in how they perceive coincidences. This isn't coincidence. It's evidence that our normal mode of processing reality hides connections that are there all the time. And you, at this moment, have the opportunity to start seeing these connections. You don't need substances. You don't need elaborate rituals. You just need consistent practice of the protocols I shared. Daily silent reflection, active imagination when strong emotions arise, regulation of the nervous system through light, breathing and movement, documentation of coincidences, and action on the signals you receive. Do this for 30 days, just 30 days, and observe what happens. You'll start to notice that the right videos appear at the right time, that the right conversations happen with the right people, that opportunities arise in ways that seem almost orchestrated. And it's not magic, it's your brain. Finally, having the resources to perceive what's always been there. It's Jung and Huberman operating through your nervous system, one through symbols and meaning, the other through neuroplasticity and regulation. But let me go deeper now, because there's a level to this conversation that few are ready to hear. Have you ever had the experience of thinking about someone, and that person contacting you minutes later, or of dreaming about something, and it manifesting the next day, or of finding information exactly when you needed it, in a way that seemed orchestrated? Conventional science explains this as statistical coincidence. With billions of people in the world having trillions of thoughts, some matches are going to happen by pure chance, and statistically, that's true. But Jung noticed something that statisticians ignore. These coincidences tend to happen in moments of high emotional charge, in life transitions, in crises, in moments where the ego is temporarily weakened and the unconscious can emerge with more force. And neuroscience now confirms this. Studies on the default mode network show that this network is especially active during intense emotional states. And when it's active, our capacity to recognize patterns and connections increases dramatically. In other words, it's not that more coincidences happen in moments of crisis. It's that our ability to perceive them increases. The filter that normally hides the connections becomes more porous. James Hollis described this on the podcast with Huberman in a poetic way. He said that the soul speaks through symptoms, through dreams, through repeated patterns of behavior that we can't change. And I add, through coincidences that seem to have meaning, Your unconscious is constantly trying to communicate. The question is, have you developed the ability to listen? And here's the paradox that almost no one understands. The more you rely on pure reason, the more disconnected you become from these messages. The more you try to control everything with analytical thought, the more the signals go unnoticed. Because the unconscious doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of symbols, emotions, bodily sensations, and seemingly random coincidences. Jung spent the second half of his life trying to build a bridge between these two worlds. He wanted to honor both rationality and mystery, both science and the soul. And Huberman, perhaps unconsciously, is doing the same. When he invites a Jungian psychoanalyst onto his neuroscience podcast, he's signaling this. There is something here that deserves attention. There's a connection that academia, the establishment, has ignored for too long. And you, watching this now, are part of that bridge. You're neither purely rational nor purely mystical. You're someone who intuits that there's more at play, but wants evidence. Someone who feels that synchronicities are real, but wants to understand how they work. Someone who knows that their unconscious holds wisdom, but doesn't know how to access it practically. That's exactly the place where transformation happens. And that's why this video found you. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates what I'm talking about. Jung had a resistant patient, an extremely rational woman who refused to accept anything she couldn't prove logically. During a session, she was describing a dream about a golden scarab beetle. At the exact moment she was speaking, Jung heard a tapping at the window. It was a beetle, very similar to the scarab in her dream, trying to get into the office. Jung caught the beetle, showed it to the patient, and said, "Here is your scarab." That moment broke something in her resistance. Not because it proved anything logically, but because the experience was so strange, so seemingly meaningful, that she couldn't simply ignore it. That's the power of synchronicity. It shatters the armor of the ego. It opens a crack through which something larger can enter. And neuroscience has an explanation for this too. When something unexpected and significant happens, your brain enters a state of high plasticity. The normal processing circuits are temporarily disrupted. And in that moment of openness, new connections can form. And that's why synchronistic experiences often precede major life changes, not because they magically cause the change, but because they create the neural opening necessary for the change to be possible. Are you in that state now? Has something opened up in you that allowed you to get this far? Some recent experience that's made you question how things really work? Some coincidence you couldn't ignore? If so, pay attention. Your brain is in a state of heightened receptivity. What you choose to focus on in the coming hours and days will have a disproportionate impact. Jung said, "What you resist persists." But I like to flip that around. What you honor flourishes. Honor the coincidences that come your way. Honor the intuitions that arise from nowhere. Honor the dreams that seem to hold messages. You don't have to understand them completely. Just recognize that they're real, that they deserve attention, that your unconscious is working even when your conscious mind isn't aware of it. And gradually, with consistent practice, the two begin to converse. The conscious and the unconscious begin to integrate. And you become what Jung called an individuated individual, someone who is no longer divided internally, someone whose conscious actions are aligned with the deepest purpose of their soul. Huberman would call that a state of optimized flow, of coherence between neural systems, of integrated brain function. It's the same thing in different languages. And you can start developing this today, now, with what I've just taught you. Let me ask you one last question. A year from now, Where do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to have become? What signs would you like to have followed? That answer, whatever it may be, is already communicating with you through intuitions, through coincidences, through videos like this that find you when you need them most. The only question is, are you going to listen? Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And Huberman has shown that you have the neurological power to make exactly that change. The unconscious isn't your enemy, it's your most powerful ally. And every synchronicity is a message from it saying, I'm here, I'm paying attention, I'm trying to guide you. This video was one of those messages. The question now is, what are you going to do with it? In the comments below, I want you to answer one thing. How did this video find you? What's going on in your life right now that made you click? And more importantly, what message do you feel your unconscious is trying to send you? It doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be a phrase, it can be a word. But when you write, you make conscious what was unconscious, and that's the first step of every real transformation. Jung drew the map. Huberman translated it into neural GPS. But you are the one who needs to walk the path. And if you've made it this far, a part of you already knows the way, already knows what you need to do, already heard the message. Now it's time to act. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the kind of person who seeks deep connections instead of superficial answers. Thank you for being part of something larger than passive entertainment. We'll see you in the next video, which, if everything goes as it should, will find you exactly when you need it most. Just like this one did.